Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of Double Double, a culture podcast. I have a guest today. We're going to talk about like food and culture, and yeah, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. I am Ran Mei, and I'm a PhD candidate in food studies at New York University. And I'm right now sitting with Albert in our office in New York City. And I research the infrastructure of food, and I also look at the landscape of food consumption and food production through the lens of space.
Awesome. Yeah, so I found your project. I think I was just looking at different projects in NYU or different programs at NYU, and then I stumbled upon your stir fry urbanism like project. Can you explain that a little bit? I thought it was super interesting, so yeah.
Thank you for finding that project. It's my thesis project when I was doing my master's in design studies at Harvard Graduate School of Design, and it is a project that looks at the urban and spatial history of Boston through the lens of Chinese restaurant from the time that when the first Chinese restaurant was officially registered on the city record in 1890 all the way to the present. So I was trying to kind of trace this genealogy and also trace the geography of Chinese restaurateur and their businesses, the workers, and the menus through archives, through city directories, and also through census sheets to figure out who are the people who are creating different flavors and what kind of the spaces they're creating and what kind of communities that they're forming. So, and you can find my project on the Harvard Library website if you search stir fry urbanism.
Yeah, that's just cool. So like in a modern using what you learned from your project, how does that like relate to like the modern era? Because there's a lot of differences between like Western and like Eastern food. So yeah, I mean, there's things to consider like pricing, speed, packaging, location. Because like if you go to if you just travel abroad to like I don't know, Philippines or like China or yeah, Vietnam, all your food is like eaten like right then and there. But in like American Western, it's more like, oh, you can get a slot bowl, like a sweet green bowl, or like kava or something. That's like mainly the fast food, or like a burger or a sandwich. So it's just so much different than like uh from like east and west. So I don't know. Do you just want to talk about that, like where you eat the food and the packaging? And so I mean, also like Japan, they also have some really cool food, like taking a bullet train, eating the little to go meal. So I just thought that was interesting. So if you want to talk on that or your take on that, that'll be so interesting.
No, I really appreciate that question because I think what really interested me about like what really drove me to do this project was when I was looking at the numbers of Chinese restaurants in the United States. It was just it was surprising. It was shockingly large. The number of Chinese restaurants in the United States is more than the number of McDonald's, Burger Kings, like Wendy's, what is it, KFC's, Subways, Taco Bell combined, and it's nuts. The number and the ubiquity of Chinese restaurants, and also like I'm from China. I'm not from here. So when I first landed in this country, when I was doing my undergrad studies, I was in the middle of nowhere, and we only had like one Chinese restaurant around the whole city, and that place was kind of a sanctuary space for me, and it's not the best food, but it's a place that I really held dear. And then when I was traveling more and more around the country, there's just like Chinese restaurant popping up of everywhere, like along the highways, in like rest stops, like even in malls, like the food court. There's always like a Chinese stuff somewhere. I was just very interested in figuring out, okay, what made them so ubiquitous all around the place, and also what kept them so popular for such a long time. And I didn't really know how long they have been around. And so I traced, this is why I went to the archives and traced what was the first one that was registered on the city records. But that history was kind of goes along like goes hand in hand with the formation of urban identities in Boston. And I just really want to kind of write I want to write the flavors and the culinary history that's created by Chinese restaurant and other ethnic restaurateur networks into the city, into the history of the city and how we know it. And also another thing about ethnic restaurants or restaurant in general is that it's one of the one of the most direct way that visitors like you and me around the world get to know a place. Like this is it's the first direct contact that you can like taste the flavor of the place, and also get to know who like what kind of communities, what kind of people lives around here, and at least who are they trying to serve. And also it's interesting that you mentioned about fast food, I think, because what I found out by tracing this history is that Chinese restaurants are one of the first business models that started to chain out. They like the first woman-owned Chinese restaurant that started to branch out, not just in Boston, but all over the country, from Boston to San Francisco to Toronto, was like actually the name of the person slipped my mind, but this business started 30 years before the first McDonald's opened its shop. And also, like, if you get to know a little bit about the business model of Chinese restaurants, you see everywhere. Doesn't really matter specifically what kind of cuisine they serve, but the menu kind of looks the same, or the signage kind of looks the same, and the way that you're kind of as a diner, that when you go to those places, the experience there's some consistency between all those places, and that's not a coincidence. The Chinese restaurant business model has been hugely successful and hugely replicable all around the world, which is why there's such a big network of it.
So speaking of like Chinese food and entrepreneurs, so I mean, why are there so many Chinese like restaurants? I mean, like they had just looking at the history, right? They were like they immigrated to America for work. But how come Chinese food just dominated? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Like, there were other people out here, in that time, but just from a business standpoint, like what made them were they missing home and they're like, we got to make a bunch of Chinese food here? Like, I don't know. Can you explain that?
That is the question that drove me to do this research, to figure out why. And I guess when was the last time this project? I finished this project probably 4 years ago. It's been a while, but there's a specific and also I guess I'm only speaking about Chinese restaurant in the Boston area, and that has some resemblance with Chinese restaurant network in New York City as well, but it's a very different timeline for the West Coast Chinese restaurants. So I want to emphasize that it's a locally specific history. Yeah, in Boston. And so Chinese restaurant, when we first started, is actually a very elite space. It's not that many. And also when it started in the late 19th century, 1890s to the 1910s, it was one of the channels that Chinese merchants who are making a lot of money from the maritime trade, connecting Canton and Boston's seaports, was basically their private club. So they came with their servants, they came with their wives, and they came with their children, and having a Chinese restaurant, starting a Chinese restaurant is one of the ways they can bring their servants into this country and then hire them as cooks and as their private chefs. And it becomes their private kitchen, but they would also open up the business for workers, events for upstairs. So one of the chapters that I wrote in my master's thesis was to kind of name this first Chinese restaurant in Boston, which has two floors. On the first floor is actually a dining hall kind of vibe that serves pretty cheap and very quick, rice bowl with syrup, or like very quick like stir fry rice, like that kind of thing for the common worker. And there is also a tea house and everything. And then upstairs, a very luxurious, very delicately decorated room that's preserved for a merchant event and merchant networks. So and also at that point, from the newspaper reporting of that restaurant specifically, all the food was served in Chinese. Like the name of the food was only announced in Chinese. It's an oral menu as well as a written menu. It's only until after the 1910s that the restaurant started to translate their menus into English and then have people coming in. And that was the time that Chinatown started to form. Okay, before Chinatown, there was just a street. There was many other different immigrant communities and ethnic communities who live in that area. But only after like probably 4 or 5 Chinese restaurants started to form a cluster, that place started to be recognized as Chinatowns. And once that Chinatowns become recognized as like a ethnic enclave, there was a whole thing called, it became like a exotic experience for the white elite to go slumming in Chinatowns, to kind of venture out in their night out. And it's also kind of portrayed in newspapers, in public media, and in advertisement as a place that is potentially that is dangerous, that is exotic, is dangerous. Somewhere else, only the brave, only the venturous elite can go there. So it becomes like a show off point for the elite. Look at me. Exactly. Really
cool place, cool food.
Exactly. And also it's a specifically gendered space as well. Because in the 1930s, we need to fact check this because there's a specific event that I wrote about in the thesis, that the House of Representative in Boston that was led by the councilman that represents Chinatown at that point is a white Irishman who initiated a bill that's called Chinese Restaurant Bill that barred white women from entering a Chinese restaurant without a male companion. They're not allowed. They wanted to make it illegal for Chinese restaurateurs to have white women entering their business without a male companion. And that was just absolutely insane for me when I found this out. And this bill passed the House twice, and eventually, and also like I think there was a whole back and forth about this bill in the House until it got struck down by the Supreme Court to be deemed unconstitutional. But because of this, it tells you what was kind of the gender dynamic and the politics of Chinese restaurant, how it was portrayed as a place that's dangerous for white women, and how it becomes a place for white elite to venture out for a night of slumming out. And then after but that also coincides with the Chop Suey craze. So I don't know if you have. Do you know that very famous Hopper painting, the Chop Suey?
No.
It's a very. I think that painting itself kind of represents the image of Chinese restaurant at that point. Chop Suey craze. That Chop Suey was. There was a very famous journalist, a New York Times journalist, and I think she wrote a book. Jennifer A. Lee. She wrote a book about the Chinese restaurant business history, also in a more broader way in United States. And she called Chop Suey is the biggest culinary joke one culture has ever played for another, because Chop Suey in Cantonese just means odd bits and ends. It's scrap food basically, but here. When Chinese restaurants started putting Chop Suey on the menu, it became this like novel dish that everybody was going crazy for, even though like but it's just all the bits and ends. You just stir fry it in a pot. So the Chop Suey craze was kind of again portrayed in paintings portrayed in films and also newspaper advertisement as this kind of high-end dining out experience. Chop suey is very at that point. If you compare it with other the other price point for ethnic restaurant at that time is actually on the very high end, and because of the chop suey craze, white people started to take advantage of the fact that it becomes very trendy and also it's very expensive. So there's a lot of Chinese restaurant that was opened up by white people at that point in Boston. So there's an Italian couple who decided to change their Italian restaurant into a Chinese restaurant because they can charge higher price for it. And it becomes like kind of a novel point, like, Italian operating Chinese. And then there are also like high-end kind of restaurant in department stores that was specifically designed to be Chinese, but only catered to the upper middle class, like upper class white consumers, shoppers for department stores. So it becomes like a whitewashed, sanitized version of Chinese restaurant because Chinese restaurants in Chinatowns are portrayed as dangerous and like the dirty, like something that is polluting.
But that's like true, authentic, like.
For them, that is the true authentic, but they also wanted to elevate the experience and made it more friendly for elite. So this is part of the chop suey craze, that you have people slumming in Chinatowns and, adventure out, and then you have the whitewashed version of Chinese restaurant in department stores in Little Italy. So yeah.
So where does who's that guy? The one where they cook in front of you. It's not P.F. Chang's. It's what is it? It's Steve Aoki's dad founded it.
I'm not that familiar with the chef space. I'm more into the history part.
Benihana's. Okay. Where does Benihana? Where do you think would Benihana fit in that like space? So it's not like, it's kind of like elevated, and it's kind of like a fusion take on like the food, right?
Right. I mean, this is the kind of thing, like,
it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I see this as a continuity of the appropriation that was happening very like in mid 20th century, like that, and I also mentioned this very briefly at the end of my project, where there's a lot of let's say like celebrity chefs who are very inspired by Chinese cooking, and then they wanted to create a more like to infuse their creativity into the Chinese cooking styles they learned, the kind of flavor profile they learned, and also kind of advertise it as something that is worth spending more on from consumers than to spend on a hole in the wall joint in Chinatown. Like for me, I think it's problematic. For me, it's problematic not just because that they're white, they can't do Chinese cooking. I think it's problematic because of the, honestly, the ignorance and also probably the not mentioning the history of Chinese restaurants, and also Chinese American restaurants in this whole fusion creative idea that they have. To make one of the I don't actually remember the name, but there was a white woman entrepreneur who wanted to start a chain Chinese restaurant that Lucky Cricket, or no Lucky, that's another one. Sorry, I don't remember, but like she wanted to make Chinese food healthy again, or she wants to make, she wants to provide like for a different kind of a clientele to enjoy Chinese cooking without with less oil, with more veggies, with more the healthy alternatives of lard or something. And I see that I just feel like if you want to do that, don't call it Chinese. Just do it like something else. I,
Okay.
I find it problematic that you are claiming to be somebody else, to be representing somebody else's history without knowing what you're representing, and also capitalizing on it without actually paying tribute.
Yeah.
And also
'Cause it's
Chinese,
not technically Chinese food.
yeah,
It's just like food that's cooked in a wok, if even a wok.
yeah, yeah. And the whole food identity thing is a very complicated issue, and is also um, like for me, I think the interesting part of identity politics is not about who get to be Chinese or not, American or not. Like that for me is not as interesting as who benefits from those messaging and who is at loss. So I look more at the consequences of debate, of discourse, of identity making, identity claiming, than the actual identity claiming itself. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy thing because if you just look at like other restaurants that, like, let's say, I don't know, Panda Express or something, they don't say it's like it's specifically Chinese food. It's like Chinese American food. So I think that's like okay, or if you look at like burgers, that's like a German, or I don't know, it's somewhere in Europe, but it's known as like an American food around the world. It's like, no, we didn't invent this.
Yeah.
That's from somewhere else.
Right.
So
But everything is always from somewhere else.
yeah, no, everything has a
Yeah.
root.
Which is why I find, like, for me, for a long time, like, trying to figure out what is Chinese about Chinese American food was the thing that really interested me. But after tracing that history, I actually felt like Chinese restaurant, like what makes Chinese restaurant Chinese is really about branding. It's not really about, like, I'm not that interested in the authenticity debate, because authenticity itself became like a exclusion and inclusion making. Like it's trying, like, to be called authentic, or to claim yourself to be authentic. You are just basically marking a difference between us and them. And it is okay if, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because it does different things in different contexts. For example, I mean, the whole rise of nationalism is hugely problematic because this whole thing about, like, the ethno racial, like, centric version of nationalism, like only people who look like me get to be Chinese, whereas everybody else does not. Like, that for me is hugely problematic because we're always migrating. Doesn't really matter if the border is, like, built a wall or not. To actually understand what kind of food or what kind of flavors, what kind of memories are made through those routes of exchange and through and movement is more interesting for me than saying that, oh, I represent Chinese, or I represent American, or I represent Italian, or like doesn't matter as long as your food is good.
Yeah. That is such a great take. I mean, tasty food is so important. And, I mean, it's like the whole cultural appropriation thing is so interesting in like a social media space too. Because have you heard of like, it was during like Lunar New Year, there was a lot of like, oh, you caught me at a very Chinese time of my life, or people like China maxing like their Instagram or TikToks, which is really funny. So you just see like a bunch of, or you're kind of getting like lectured by a bunch of like white people, just like drink hot water in the morning, or just like they have these like these it's like an Adidas like tracksuit that was like very controversial in it looked like a Chinese, it was like, it was like,
Oh, really?
yeah, it was crazy. It just looked cool, and then people were just wearing it, and they're like, oh, you can't wear that if you like,
Yeah.
if you, it looked like traditional like Chinese, like what would you call it,
like are you mean like those
it has like the little,
the collar is kind of, is it, I don't know.
I have to try and find the picture.
Yeah.
But
But it's okay. I think I get what you're saying. Like the whole the expression of identity or the claiming of an ethnic identity through attire, through food, through all this kind of like, um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh no,
like,
that's
yeah, I don't even know what that's called.
what
But
was this?
yeah,
It
yeah.
had like a traditional
Yeah, like a tongue suit. Oh my god.
it's funny.
I know.
So there's like so much like China's like super popular on like online right
Oh
now, which
god.
is really
Oh,
it's
because they own TikTok still.
yeah, it's still so it's I don't know. It's people are seeing like, oh, look at all these
Yeah.
cool like places in China. So
Yeah.
it's like they're all still romanticized. It's like
Yeah.
way back when like, oh, China's this cool like exotic like
Yeah.
interesting place. So if you're in China, it's really cool right now, you know. So
I don't know. I just feel like you can do whatever you want. If you know Chinese history better than I do, you can wear whatever you want.
yeah.
Yeah, just like when you're doing, I don't know, like that costume or even that outfit. I wouldn't be offended if a white person wears that and tells me all this like where does this style come from? Just whoever you're claiming to be or to do to represent, if you can explain it and you know it, yeah, do it.
So just have like a little bit of context and
Yeah.
actually like try and learn about the culture.
Yeah.
Because like I mean in Japan you can go to like Kyoto and wear like kimono and just
Yeah.
walk around and look like a
Yeah.
local. It's like okay, yeah, I'm obviously not
Yeah.
Japanese, but
But it's
it's still
fun.
cool in
Yeah.
like I mean I won't understand everything,
Yeah.
but they have like businesses and different
Yeah.
companies that want to share the culture. So that's like something that's interesting to me.
Right.
Like, okay, let's not gatekeep this
Yeah.
thing and let's just keep this open. But yeah, if you're gonna keep this open, at least like take the time and learn a little bit
Yeah.
about it, you know.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah,
That's all I'm saying. Um, yeah.
yeah. And I was also looking at some of the graphs in your project, and I thought that it was the cuisine like popularity like over time. So you would just see um like Chinese food or like Korean food get more popular over time, and just like British food go like less popular.
Well, I think that was the graph that I was citing. That was not my graph. The
Oh.
graph was from my advisor's work. He wrote a piece. No, I think a journalist from the Atlantic interviewed him, and he shared his work on restaurant, what he calls the hierarchy of value. Not the hierarchy of value. The hierarchy of taste, and how he maps the hierarchy of taste between different kind of cuisine was to track the trend of price point for different kind of restaurants. So, I mean, he can probably tell you more about that than me, but I was referencing his work because I was trying to kind of position Chinese restaurant in relations to all other kinds of ethnic cuisines, and see like how did and price point as an indicator of where it sits on the hierarchy of taste. Is it something that is valued more or less than, let's say, Thai food or Korean food or Italian food and all of that? And how did it change over the past century and a half? What I learned or what I referenced from Krishna Dore's work, which was my advisor, who is the hierarchy of taste person, is that Chinese food, regardless of how not ubiquitous from the early on, like, or later on when it became more diversified, when it became more regionally specific, when it became more, let's say, covering a wider range of the market, the price point of Chinese brands still lies on the very bottom tier of ethnic cuisine in general, and compared to, let's say, like Thai food, which experienced a huge boost after the 80s and 90s, and right now is very quickly becoming one of the most popular and the most higher priced Asian ethnic food, and also Korean and also Japanese specifically. Like, you know, sushi commands such a high price point that a lot of Japanese restaurants actually owned by Chinese people, because they can just, you know, very quickly switch to a more expensive menu. All of that tells me that there's something funny going on about how much people value different kind of food, or how much that consumers are willing to pay based on sometimes like biases, sometimes just very arbitrary kind of understanding of cuisine. And that is what I am trying to understand now, which is a continuation of this project, but on a larger scale.
On a larger scale, as in?
As in, like, I'm right now working on a project that looks at Chinese restaurant in the global landscape, and how, if looking at a global Chinese restaurant network, by tracing the movement, by tracing the migration route of labor capital and flavors, from mainland China to coastal China to Southeast Asia, and also like to eventually generations after eventually North America.
That's super interesting, because like after everywhere I've traveled all over the world, whether it's Timor or Fiji or New Zealand, like all of those places have Chinese food. So, and mainly because they had like Chinese people like work there. So, I mean, I love it. I love the Chinese food out there. It's just I just like good food. So, and I'm a big eater. So.
Yeah, I find it
cool.
it interesting too, that how there's so many like the Chinese restaurant everywhere in the world, but also there's some, like, even though the branding of Chineseness is very consistent, because you can't really mistake it from any other kind of restaurant. When you see a Chinese restaurant, it's a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
But there, like, when you really look at the menus, the ingredients, the price point, the decor, the people, the language, the dialect that's spoken in those restaurants, there is very different, there's big difference between places to places. And that is the thing that interests me. Like, how do people who share, let's say, a common ancestry came to these places in the first place, but also learn to adapt to local culture, local landscape, local like market, and while incorporating their the knowledge, the culinary knowledge that they inherit.
Yeah, no, I'm stoked for your research then. I'm so excited. So yeah, I don't know. I think food and just the world just interests me. So yeah, I have some fun questions at the end. I think we talked about everything that I want to talk about, or do you want to talk about anything else that's on your mind, or?
Not really. I think I'm good.
We talked about a lot, so.
We did talk about a lot,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry that I
It's good. That's the whole point.
Yeah, great. I am very passionate about my research. I think the reason I ended up in food studies because I just told myself I wanted to do something that I absolutely love when I still have the brain power to do. I am trained as an architect and urban planner. When I was doing my undergrad, I also worked in the field for many years as an urban designer. So, and I think I really wanted to kind of bridge my background in urban history, urban design, with this like passion about food and food places.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. So, yeah, let's just do go-to foods. So if you could eat a meal with anybody, dead or alive, who would you eat with, and what meal would you want to eat?
If general life, right now, I just really want to have, dinner with my advisor, because I really need to nail him down more and just be like, hey, let's talk about my research. But it's a very rare, I don't think, and it's also a very high stress situation. Probably not. But I guess
it could be anybody.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I would like to eat with my neighbor who lives down the block. It's a very easy grab, and he also works on he's also doing a PhD in history, so we have a lot to talk about. He works on cattle.
Oh, nice.
What else?
The type of meal.
Food, type of meal. I love a taco.
Yeah.
A taco is so. I've never had a bad taco, and they're just everywhere. Food trucks, we have pretty good Mexican place uptown where I live, and I recently traveled to the West Coast. Oh my god, I just have the best fish taco ever. So yeah.
Tacos, awesome. Well, thanks again for being on this podcast. I really appreciate it. So, yeah. Any last words before I close it?
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you.